Welcome back to Weekend Dawn on Channel 405. My name is Jacob Mushukwa. Let's look at this now. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Friday that the party was now focusing on aggressively implementing an economic reconstruction and recovery plan to create jobs. Since the country was hit by the coronavirus in 2020, around 2 million jobs and counting have been lost, and many people have fallen below the poverty line. He said the ANC's key plan is to mobilize investment, create new jobs, support existing ones, and accelerate industrialisation. He also said the ANC government and broader society would need to continue discussions on the viability of a basic income grant. This will help provide a social safety net for the poor. I'm joined by our politics editor, or we were supposed to be joined by Sbu Ngalo, but he's not available at the moment. We're actually joined by economist Kanti Pai to take this discussion further. Kanti, thank you for your time and thank you for joining us on Weekend Dawn. 2 million jobs lost so far. Do you think we can ever recover from what we've experienced, specifically from the economy front?
No, I don't think that we can recover, but I think the president is quite right when he talks about reconstruction. And I think that's exactly where we're going. The world has really changed. I think that we're now in the second year of this. And I think one of the things that's going to happen is that we need new solutions on actually how to contend with the coming year. Because I think, as many people have said in the medical field, that this virus is going to be with us for quite some time. So I think it's important that we think about not so much a recovery at this moment, but actually a reconstruction plan. How do we reconstruct an economy, or how do we create, in an imaginative way, an economy through this crisis and post the crisis? So I don't think that we should look at a recovery. And I think, some of the things that the president actually announced are important, but one then thinks about, our biggest failures in this country are usually actually in the doing.
And that's just one of the things that he did announce. Now, how does one mobilize investment during this time? Because he did mention things like mobilizing investment and industrialization, etc. But during this time, how do you mobilize investment?
What we have learned is that investors like places that are buzzing. So this is why many people will say, we need growth first to create employment, because one of the things that people want is that in order for people to come and invest in your economy, they want to see that it's growing, so there are opportunities there. So we need to first create those opportunities. People need to see that we're growing. So, and I think the one area, I think the president talks about public works and this big public works program that's going to create mass employment. Now, I want you to be careful about thinking about creating mass employment in this environment, but certainly, if we think about some of the things that have to happen, for example, in the past year, there's a lot of money that has not been spent because we're in lockdown. So you can think about, building some of this infrastructure that's been talked about. We know, in housing, for example, in water, there's certainly a lot of money that can be spent in building houses and actually getting people back to work. And so in that space, we need creative ways. And I know that there is some work that's coming through there. And I think, in infrastructure, certainly in the tourism sector, where now we have to rethink tourism itself, about not so much about outsiders, because that's going to be quite difficult during this crisis, but certainly how we actually galvanize locals to actually, as we've said, it's short left. These are the kinds of things that we need to do immediately. But then obviously, then they give us the idea, as I say, of rethinking it, because then clearly, if you are now shifting the tourism sector towards locals, then your offering is slightly going to be a little bit different. I guess pricing has to be different. So I think the important thing we have to drill into our minds is that we need to reimagine the way in which we live, how things are being done, so that actually then once we start to see that employment, let's start to see that growth, even in energy, right? We've been talking about renewables. In agriculture, we've been talking about, we know last year, we had food shortages and prices of food went up. So certainly what we want is to actually invest as much as we can, get people at work. And then once people are able to, and all of the industries that I'm mentioning actually are all industries that can actually function under lockdown or under, this kind of environment. And then in that way, we will be able then to sort of, restart the economy, but also at the same time focusing on areas that we should have been focusing on before that we have not. And so not think about it, as I say, as a recovery, but a reconstruction or reimagination of the way we do things, and then study from there. So I think that is really the way we should be going. And I think in some ways the president actually sort of alluded to those things, but it's going to be now the strategies that we employ. And I think that's the detail that I'm really concerned about, because that's where we now actually need to detail how we go about that.
So, Kanti, I'm looking at the investors that we're talking about and even the public at large. Do you think yesterday's speech boosted the confidence of the public and investors? Was it enough?
Look, I mean, I think I was seeing earlier the interview we were having about really about mass communication and talking to people. I think this is the main problem that we face, because it's one thing, especially because I mean this thing, is broadcast, I guess, live on television, and you see this. But how does the message in simple ways, in accessible ways, actually get in ways that people can chew these things? So I think I don't know that we heard anything new yesterday. I could not pinpoint anything new. So it is sort of reinforcement of all of those things. And of course, this is a message mainly for for members of the ANC and clearly supporters of the ANC. So I think a lot has to be done to communicate to people. I think our mass media, social media, where you can reach people, is going to be very important in terms of actually when we finally have a strategy about what we're going to do in each sector, how we, for example, we're going to galvanize the different industries. Then I think it might be useful then to, at that time, communicate those things to people. So certainly, I think that is where the problem is going to be. How each sector, the interactions that are there to actually get people to understand what is available and what is going to be done. I'm not so convinced that, in the manner that it is being communicated at the moment, is actually getting people to feel like they can participate, that this is for them. I think that is where we need a lot more work, because really these things about the economy are not for economists, they're not for political scientists, they are actually for the public to engage.
I think something that's also worth mentioning is the social relief grant, which is also coming to an end. Where will that leave the people who are now below the poverty line due to this pandemic? And then going forward, I look at the basic income grant. Where will that fit in, and will government, or can government afford that?
Look, I mean, to start with, actually, your first question, I think this is one of the things that has been really, really problematic, right? Throughout this problem, and people like me have been saying, when we started with this grant, it was important to see what it can do to also help people. One of the things it has done is to really, help people a lot, and I think it is, nobody can argue that it has not helped people, avoid starvation through this very difficult period. And we know that many, many, many people were in dire straits through this period who could not make any living. I was actually speaking to someone the other day who told me, and this is someone who actually is a professional, and she says to me, she has not made an income in some 6 to 8 months, and that was something that was quite scary for me. But likely he says, but I have a second income in my husband. And we know that many families don't have that. Many families are single income households who have not been able to do anything. So that basic income has been important. What is important then, for now, is actually an imagination on how we're going to try and actually open up opportunities with the money that we have. I always say, we've got a lot of money in South Africa. We are a rich country. And if we were to direct it properly, we could actually do without that income grant, which takes me then to the basic income grant. The basic income grant is a solution to a problem about how people cannot access work, cannot access economic opportunities, so that they can do for themselves. And I really think that there is a lot we can do to support people to do for themselves. As I said, that when we talk about infrastructure, we talk about infrastructure that relates to what people want. So in one thing, there's a lot of people, for example, who have been given land for agriculture. That land must be given, must be supported with water. They must be supported with storage facility for the produce, transportation. We know that we want roads that lead to people's communities so that people can transport their produce, that actually tourists can come and reach people. These kinds of things are important, and how we actually get young people in terms of funding and supporting their ideas, linking them up with people. So all of the things that have to be done. So the basic income grant is only useful if you are actually transitioning people. So I give you an income because we think you are on your way somewhere else. So basically, you are stuck now, but we know that there are other provisions that say while you have not yet gotten to your destination, your point of success, your point of independence, we need to support you. But it is not useful it's actually that it will trap our people if we don't add that along with a part that we give you this basic income grant, because actually it is a supportive way as you make your way. And I think we have not done enough yet to be able to actually make sure that people are actually in a transitionary phase from having nothing, but also building up and building to something. And I think those things are necessary to be done both, otherwise people are going to be trapped.
Kanti, just in 30 seconds, what is the amount that would be appropriate for a basic income grant?
Look, I mean, I think that it is really what you're trying to. I think the important thing is we have to decide what the basic income grant seeks to do. If it seeks to actually just give somebody, some food, to get them just up above the poverty line, you're probably talking anything between 600 to 800 rand a month. But that's actually just for them to actually keep eating and eat and be decent. That's what you are looking at. But if you are looking to give it to a student, for example, that needs to eat, that needs to find transportation, to start looking for jobs, that's another thing. Because remember, as I said, is the basic income grant about transitioning, or is it about just feeding you, or is it actually something in the middle? So I think the first point is to actually decide what your basic income grant is meant to do. And then we decide on what it is that and how much it will be.
Well, looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. Thank you very much, Kanti. That was economist Kanti Pai wrapping up our January 8th statement discussions here on Weekend Dawn.